Hey guys, Zen here, and today I wanted to go over the 5 worst attacking operators in Rainbow Six Siege. Of course, this is my opinion, and none of this is set in stone or fact. Now, particularly with the worst list, every operator has their place, and so if you don't agree with these picks, leave a comment and we can discuss. But this list is in order, with number 1 being who I think is the worst attacker currently in the game, so keep that in mind as we proceed. So to begin, at number 5, we have Dokkaebi, one of my personal favorite operators over the years, but one that's continued to drop in popularity. Dokkaebi is a 2-speed, 2-armor attacker with the logic bomb, and it has 2 functions. The first is after an enemy is taken out, they drop a phone, and Dokkaebi can then walk over to it, hack it, and gain access to the entire camera system of the defenders. The other ability is to pull it out and call every single defender on the map, causing their phone to vibrate, revealing their position. Both of these abilities are incredible and can absolutely change the direction of a round, but the rest of Dokkaebi doesn't make up for what's left after her really solid gadget is used up. Dokkaebi is one of only a very small handful of operators that has to rely on their secondary weapon because it's the only automatic option they have. Now recently, Dokkaebi got her C75 back and has always had the SMG-12, and those weapons are solid, but even with those options, if I look at every other attacker, I actually think Dokkaebi has the worst attacking loadout in the game, and possibly the worst loadout period in Rainbow Six Siege. Her main rifle, the MK14, is good, but it's also the weakest DMR in the game, with every other DMR putting out more damage per bullet. It does have manageable recoil when you equip it with the muzzle brake, but is usually outclassed by the other DMRs that are available. The only other primary she has is the Boss G, and for memes, there's nothing better. But when that doesn't cut it, you're left relying on the SMG-12 or C75, and if you opt for the Gon 6, then you're left with absolutely no automatic options to back you up. I think Dokkaebi's biggest redeeming factor is that in a team setting where everyone is talking and people can call out exactly when they need calls, or that they've taken out an enemy and want Dokkaebi to come over and hack, then you don't really need to worry about the weapons. However, if Dokkaebi is left to fend for herself, it takes up a lot of downtime to get the calls off or hack, which leaves you vulnerable, and the weapons can be lacking. There was a time when Dokkaebi got frags, and it was amazing for her because you had this 1-2 punch of calling someone up, hearing them close by, and tossing a frag in their direction to kill them or flush them out. Once she lost those, people really started to avoid playing her, and there are other operators like Lion and Jackal that serve a similar purpose, and in some cases do it better. Dokkaebi is the definition of a team op. She makes for great backup, and that in itself is an important role in Rainbow Six Siege. My perfect buff for her would be to make her a 3-speed and give her back frag grenades. It sounds like a lot, but as incredible operators like Zero, Iana, and Flores get introduced, Dokkaebi just gets drowned out by better weapons and more powerful utility. Next up at number 4 is Ying. Ying's entire gameplay loop is to move defenders, and the key word there is defenders. But in doing so, she actually forces everyone but her to move as well, and that can be a frustrating balance. So Ying is a 2-speed, 2-armor operator with the Candela. It's a throwable, rollable, and deployable gadget that goes off and sends flashes out in every direction. When it does go off, it's super effective, and ever since they made it that you can no longer turn your back to avoid getting flashed, she has seen a rise in the effect. The downside is that Ying can be unpredictable and challenging to work with because her team can also become victims of this, and it happens all the time. The mechanic to using the Candela is that if you just click and throw it, it rolls for a few seconds and goes off. The alternative is to cook it, and once it lands, it'll go off instantly. But the only person who knows this is Ying, and so if you go to push with her, you have to pay close attention to what she's doing and know to get out of her way, or you'll be flashed. And that's why you see Ying pushing by herself a lot. There's a pretty high skill ceiling here, because a poor Ying player can cripple the rest of the team, but a skilled Ying player can get an easy plant down and keep defense flashed, and timing is everything. Now, one of the most underrated features of the Candela is the ability to deploy it. Just like Fuse, you can place this on the floor above or on a soft wall, and it'll fire flashes on the opposite side. But unlike Fuse, you don't have the ability to have it go off exactly when you want it because it's on a short timer, and I think she'd be far more effective if it did work like Fuse. That unpredictability that comes with the gadget could be avoided almost entirely if Ying could deploy the gadget, tell her team to clear out, and set it off exactly when she wants. For her loadout, she has the T95 LMG, and for how much love LMGs are getting in the meta right now, I think this is the worst one. It's more like an AR than an LMG, and for LMGs that can be a good thing, but it's got a fairly bouncy recoil and slower fire rate. I've honestly never been a fan of this weapon, and unfortunately, the only other option is a shotgun that a lot of people consider the worst in the game. The thing with Ying is that when the Candela works, it's a tide turner, and unless they're Warden, the defenders have to get out of the way when she tosses out her gadget. She's really tough to get right, because if you did give all the attackers immunity to her gadget, then that could probably break the game. But because they aren't, you end up flashing your team constantly and pushing by yourself. I actually think the best possible outcome for Ying is for her to get more utility. A super shorty or an ITA-12S in her loadout would make make a world of difference for her, because then you could breach open unique spots and toss Candelas over. But I think Ying is a clear example of a high-risk, high-reward attacker that can be amazing with a skilled player and a lot of playtime. But at the end of the day, she's inconsistent at best, and her loadout lacks that big draw to keep choosing her. At number 3 is Glaz, and I'm with you. He has the bearing 9 now, and that helps him for sure. But even with an automatic weapon, there is still no real reason to pick Glaz, and no one likes movement penalties. Asking someone to stand still in Rainbow Six Siege is like asking a fly to go to a frog's pool party. It just doesn't make sense, and the only way to get the full effect of Glaz's utility is for you to stand still. Otherwise, the effect begins to dim, and if you end up in a gunfight or strafing, you're blind through smoke just like every other operator. And that's on top of the fact that bearing 9 or not, you get no ability without using the OTS DMR. And so even as a 3-speed operator, and even with the bearing 9, Glaz is still forced into his DMR to use his gadget, and otherwise, he's just a guy with a bearing 9. So if you didn't catch it, Glaz is now a 3-speed operator with access to the flip sight. With the sight on, you get a longer zoom scope and the ability to highlight enemies bright yellow. I feel like in lower ranked lobbies where people don't pre-fire as much and there isn't as much jiggle peeking and fast movement, Glaz can hold his own. His primary is the strongest DMR in the game and only takes a maximum of 3 shots to kill anything. And so if you can stay on target and you enjoy single shot weapons, Glaz is a slayer. But the meta is much deeper than that, and it can be tough to land 3 hits consistently. And so when you back up and take him for what he is, Glaz is a pure fragger and not much else. Now, he has the option of frag grenades and smoke grenades, and it's the only time where you could actually be holding yourself back by not choosing frag grenades. Because with Glaz, you want as much smoke as possible because it creates a totally unfair advantage in your favor against all but one defender that can see through the smoke. If you go with frags, then you have to rely on teammates and their aim and placement of the smoke to line you up to get kills. Now, frags are amazing, and basically every other operator with them defaults to them, but Glaz has to make that very awkward choice, and if you don't get those kills through the smoke, then you've just thrown out frag grenades and everything that you can do with them. Look, I'm ecstatic that Glaz finally has an automatic weapon, and yes, it only makes him better. And it's also great to have that extra speed with him now that he's a 3-speed, but you still never really need a Glaz, and if you're out to get kills, there are operators with frag grenades, better guns, and much better utility that are available instead. At number 2 is Sense, and this is the first and probably the only time I'll talk about an operator like this, but Sense is redundant. I genuinely have not come into any one situation in Rainbow Six Siege where I felt like Sense would have made a difference, and beyond the gadget, this operator struggles to have any redeeming factors. So Sense is a 1-speed 3-armor attacker that brings the ROU projector system gadget. It's a wheel that rolls on the ground and projects a glowing green beam of light in its path. The intent is to block off sightlines or to cloak the attackers, but what really ends up happening is that this wheel goes in all different directions and becomes incredibly unpredictable, and so the only way I can describe Sense and the ROU's utility is messy, and I'm going deeper here. Bookshelves matter, chair legs matter, bed frames matter, other operators matter, and even the bomb itself matters. As this wheel rolls, absolutely anything it comes into contact with will send it headed off in the opposite direction. So in reality, you never truly know where it'll end up, and so it's almost impossible to predict exactly who can see you and from where. You could toss it perfectly, but not account for that table leg just before it hits the corner of the wall, and it'll go off in a new direction. And because this is Siege, and the fit and finish of every room could have some kind of gameplay ramification, it's tough to have a gadget that interacts with everything, from furniture to defender gadgets. There's just no way to know 100% what the outcome will be, and it's not a great feeling. But here's the even bigger issue for me. In basically every situation, I'd rather have smoke grenades. Both the ROU and smoke grenades are made to cloak the attackers or seal off sightlines. Both are countered by Jaeger and Wamai, and both are throwable items. Smoke grenades, though, were actually reworked to be more predictable when you use them, because now they make this perfect dome when they go off, and they didn't always work like that. And with smoke grenades, I also get an operator with their own gadget that makes a lot more sense, like thermite or gridlock. And so my thoughts on the ROU can be summed up like this: I'd rather use smoke grenades. As for Sense, there's just not much to be excited about. Being a 1-speed usually means you have a very effective gadget or an amazing weapon. Fuse, for instance, has the AK-12 and the 6P41 LMG, and Doc has the stim pistol. Sense has neither, and this operator's main assault rifle is honestly one of the worst in the game. The POF-9 has low damage and a good amount of recoil, and so for me, it's not a reliable choice. Now, the best part is that it's got a massive magazine with 50 rounds, and you have almost every sight option available for it. So if you're looking for something super customizable with endless rounds, then it might be worth it. Now, the other option for Sense is the 417 DMR, and it is good. I've now defaulted to this option because it hits hard, gets the 3.0 scope, and you get a little extra utility by being able to open up hatches with it. Aside from that, there's no secondary shotgun for Sense, no SMG 11 or 12, nothing in the loadout makes up for the lackluster gadget or the 1-speed. And so I don't want to rip rip this operator. I think if you can find the right way to perfect Sense, then great. And I've also heard that on console, the POF9 is a lot more manageable. But at the very least, I don't recommend you pick Sense if you want something consistent. Pick an operator with smoke grenades if you want the same kind of utility, and you'll also get much better guns and a gadget that can serve an entirely different purpose. And finally, the attacker that I feel is currently the worst in the game is Blitz, and it's pretty simple. I don't think there's been a worse meta for Blitz to exist than the one we're in now. Blitz is a 2-speed, 2-armor operator with the flash shield, and I'll say that when Blitz is charging and gets up close, he's a nightmare. But that's key here. He must first get up close. And this meta is so utility heavy that during your run for a higher KD, you're bound to run into a Gersmot, Razor Shell, EDD, Goo, or be slowed down by Malusi's Banshee. And for other operators, it's a different experience, because with almost all of those gadgets, you can keep your sights up and defend yourself with lots of firepower. Blitz's only weapon is a pistol, and as you could imagine, against defenders who know exactly where you are, it's never enough. And so you either retreat and try a different approach, or you get a lucky headshot. Back when Blitz got his big rework, where he became a 2-speed and could run with the shield up, operators like Thorn and Malusi didn't exist. You also didn't have to deal with Kapkan being able to place more than one EDD on a doorway, and when your whole goal as this operator is to charge into sight and cause chaos, you don't always stop to check for bombs. Now, for me, I've always felt that Blitz was designed to die. This is an operator who runs headfirst into gunfights, gets close enough to flash the enemy, and takes them out. Being a tactical Blitz player is just about knowing that perfect time to strike, but you have to accept the fact that when you go for that charge, you're going to die, or at best, trade. I think all Blitz players are aware of that. It's not about life preservation as much as it's about taking down as many people as you can before the inevitable happens. And of course, there are those rounds that Blitz takes everyone out. And that usually happens because you come as a surprise. But this meta works against you in so many ways because of how trap heavy and utility heavy it is. Being able to get that far is a challenge. And while you're running, you're also making a ton of noise. And so if any defender is nearby, they'll hear you before they see you. But if your goal for the day is to run into sight, disrupt the defenders, and maybe come away with a few kills, then Blitz can help accomplish that. It just doesn't change the fact that this meta is always working against you, and even just one Goo or Banshee is enough to put you down. Blitz is an anomaly in Siege. He's both frustrating to play against and easy to counter, both strong with perfect timing and incredibly delicate. He had his time as the scariest operator in the meta, but now I think is the worst period for him to exist. And guys, those are my picks for the 5 worst attackers in Rainbow Six Siege. Be sure to check out the worst defenders as well as the best operators list, and let us know who your worst attackers are. Remember to get subscribed, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Hey, I'm out.